It's a terrible 10 for the town as they fell to a 10th successive away defeat at Queen's Park Rangers on Monday night. Alongside me to look back on an evening at Loftus Road which promised a heck of a lot more than it delivered is the Lutonian journalist James Cunliffe. Jimbo, when your luck's out, my word is it out.
Well, if it wasn't for bad luck, I don't think we have any luck at all.
Ain't that the truth? Yeah, we'll look back on the evening, discuss one or two other things that's going on, and look ahead to Saturday's cup tie at Notts Forest straight after this intro.
For me, it's the people and the spirit of the people as well.
I love this town. I love this town. I love this town. You know what I love about this town is actually you. Everyone in it has got this massive soul.
We're Luton people, and that's what we care about.
Hello everyone, welcome along to another episode of the Luton Town Supporters Trust podcast, the award-winning, longest-running Luton Town podcast, having scooped bronze in the Best Football League podcast category in the Football Content Awards. This season our show is in association with Solid, providing opportunities, provisions and assistance so our academy can fulfil their potential. As I mentioned before the intro, we're going to look back on QPR 2, Luton Town 1. Jimbo and myself will do that. We're also well aware of the rumour mills fired up again with regards to Rob Edwards. We're going to have a look at that. Is there any truth in it? What's the future? We'll cover all of that, and then we'll have a little look ahead to Saturday's cup tie at Notts Forest. Let's start with Monday night though, Jimbo. If we go back to the preview that we did, and you, Dan, and I, not just the preview, but the review after the Christmas games, I called for change. We knew we weren't going to get change in the dugout, and, we're okay with that. That was fine. Therefore, it had to change on the pitch. I had my doubts as to whether it would, but credit where it's due, there was a change. When the team sheet came out, you could still have seen a back five, to be fair, but Rob didn't do that. This was very much the most obvious 4-2-3-1 you've ever seen. It was, there was no, is it, will it, won't it, or anything like that when you saw it play out on the pitch. Like at Norwich, we have people telling us it was still a back five when it wasn't. This one was very clearly 4-2-3-1. The same back four as what you would have expected anyway. Amari'i left back, McGuinness, Holmes, centre back, Walters right back, two in front of them being Liam Walsh and Marvellous Nakamba. Then a three on the left of Zach Nelson, right of Tahith Chong, and Lamine Fannin made his debut in the 10 position, and it was a 10 position. It wasn't a striker or anything like that. That striker was Carlton Morris. So immediately I was encouraged. I have to say in the warm-up I wasn't, because I could see the three centre-backs warming up together and I just assumed that was a back three, but it wasn't. It was definitely a change in formation. And when you look at it now as a whole, I don't think anyone can argue that we didn't look a whole lot better in that formation than we have for a long, long time.
Yeah, I mean, you texted me at that point. You were probably in the stands. I was knee-deep in the Queen's Park Rangers press box pies, which are fantastic, by the way. If I'm going to give them anything, it's that. Who ate all the pies? This fella. So I was, fearing that, because you texted me it and then came out, and when I was pleasantly surprised, really, that a back four was there. It didn't mean they defended any better, but the back four was there. What it did mean is that there was vastly more going forward than we'd seen probably in the entirety of, well, at least three of the previous games, but most of the away games as well. And that was encouraging. I think at the beginning of the season, didn't he say we're going to try and outscore people? Well, maybe that was the evidence there, because it's a shame they didn't have Christ in the squad, because they were scared of crosses.
Boom, boom. Yeah, indeed. Yeah, as I say, we'll come on to Rob's future in a moment. I should just caveat what we're about to say. Whether you are Rob in or Rob out, and whether you've even got that decision to make now, you are still allowed to accept the positives that were there on Monday night. It doesn't make you any less or any more of a fan because you don't like the manager. We support the badge, not the guy who's picking the team. So we are going to pick out positives from this game, because we've done an awful lot of away reviews where we've had nothing positive to talk about. We'll also reflect on the negatives, and there were many of them as well. But if you don't want to hear the positives, that is absolutely fine, but they're still allowed to be referenced just because the manager is the manager. I think that's fair to point out, isn't it?
Yeah, great. Well, I've just pointed out the defence still wasn't that much cop, and every time a ball got flung in the box, it was panic stations, and eventually the goal came from one of those, the first one. But going forward, you had Zach Nelson and Chong out on the flanks, really driving at the Rangers team and providing the penetration that we just haven't seen in recent weeks. And that's what we thought that's the Chong we thought we were getting. That's the Zach Nelson we didn't know we had, and now we're glad we have got. And that was really quite positive. Fanner had some good little touches, probably a bit slow to start, but he really worked his way into the game.
The team were really, weren't they? I mean, for 20 minutes, we couldn't really get a grip in the game. I would suggest that's largely because the formation changed and there wasn't a great deal of time to work on it. We're led to believe that the players had Thursday and Friday off after the Norwich game, which is fair enough. They'd just played 4 games in 12 days. Of course, we would love to have used those 2 days to prepare further on this formation, but they're only human beings. They're not robots, and it's fine for them to have had a couple of days off after a heavy period. So they're only looking at 2, maybe 3 days at best to have worked on that formation. So were Rob to still be around and sticks with that formation, I would expect an awful lot of natural improvement, because in the first 20 minutes, we didn't get our shape right, did we? We didn't get our press right. We didn't get the midfield shield right. And down the wide areas, we didn't know whether to tuck in or whether to go out wide. And generally, the pattern of play was the ball made its way to Smith on the right-hand side or Chair on the left-hand side, and crosses came into the box. And as you said, we couldn't deal with it. I mean, we had a warning sign. Frey had a header that Kaminsky saved. You thought that was a good save, and then he said, "Hold my beer," from the Jimmy Dunn header shortly after, which was an absolute world-class save that he pushed onto the crossbar. Quite how the rebound gets missed, I've no idea yet.
He's a defender.
Well,
Jimmy Dunn's a defender.
He's used to only scoring in his own goal with regards to our games, isn't he? But
shouldn't continue to mock him, I suppose. He's had the last laugh, hasn't he?
Well, he has, yeah. I don't quite know what he was standing there cheering about, but that's by the by. And then it was coming, the opening goal. Really disappointing goal from our point of view, because it starts in their penalty box. They play it around because we've not got the press quite right. Then they come forward with it, and Frey, who's the centre forward, picks the ball up 10 yards inside his own half, sends it down the wing straight away. No centre half's gone in with him. There's only one striker to mark here. It's not like they're playing a front 2, only playing a front 1, 2 wingers either side of him. So no centre half's gone with him. In fact, they both dropped probably 15, 20 yards deep. So he's got all the space in the world to play that ball down the line. Amari'i's struggling with Paul Smith's pace anyway. And Smith's direct and sort of a little bit of a bugger of a winger, really. And then the ball gets sent back to, I think it was the right back, to put in. But whilst all this is happening, Frey's allowed to run 50 yards with no centre half picking him up. Again, he's the only guy that these centre halves have got to mark. Haven't got to worry about anyone else at all. He's allowed to drift onto the back stick where Rue Walters is waiting. Obviously, that's a mismatch height-wise. Okay, there's many people that suggest that Rue Walters should have been a little bit stronger. He definitely gets 2 hands in his back. One of those hands then controls the ball via his chin and then down. I mean, the finish is good. But how we've got from inside their box to him controlling the ball, whether, even allowing for the fact that it's with his hand, without that guy being blocked off or stopped or something done to him. I mean, it doesn't matter what your formation is or anything like that. Surely a centre-half's got to think to themselves, he is the only danger here. I'll go and pick him up, even if he's not my man, even if it's the other centre-half's man, I'll go and pick him up and we'll stay 0-0. But it didn't happen, and that was disappointing. And whatever formation we go with from here on in and whatever manager we have from here on in, some recognition of basics has to come into this defensive output, and quick.
It does. I mean, I would hate for them to watch that goal and think, well, we were right to play back 3 because the right-sided centre half would have been the man covering Frey there. I'd hate for that to happen. But also, in just basic defending it was not good from the minute they crossed the halfway line, really. There was plenty of places and times to engage, and they didn't. And you get to a situation where you've got Frey. I don't know how he scored 2 goals against Luton this season, because he had done nothing else, really. But they played to their strengths, and actually you've got to give them credit to that, really. Whack it to the back stick, and he's never going to win a battle with rumours. I thought the only angle I saw for the whole night was the little clip that Sky put on Twitter, because I'm sat in the press box. They didn't show any other angle, so the angle I saw didn't look like he'd handballed it, but I did think he'd give him a little nudge or something, which probably should have been pulled up, and obviously the ball goes up, and I still don't know why nobody's covering on the line, really, for him to score at that acute angle. It was a bit soft. And then he doesn't really celebrate for a couple of seconds.
Because he knows he's handballed.
Yeah, he thinks I'm going to get pulled up here, and he doesn't. And everybody else is telling me that it's a handball. The angle, the angle I saw, I didn't see that, but I thought there was an infringement there. And then the reaction makes you think, well, he thinks there's one as well, and he's got away with it. And then he runs to the corner, and he's like, because
he stole one
at his own players, because he's like, I can't believe I've got away with that, really. And like you say, when your luck's not in, but that's that one action. It shouldn't be getting to the point where Rubles is defending the back stick against giant Michael Frey. So, really, really soft and disappointing. And you're thinking, oh, here we go again. But actually, maybe it's been a bit too generous to say for the second half of the first half, but certainly towards the end of the half, Luton came more into it. And obviously they got the goal right on the stroke of half time, and hell of a header. I wish he'd done it twice in the match, because they could have got one right at the end as well. But and the press box is right in front of the QPR fans. It completely silenced them, because they were having a good time until then. And you're thinking, well, that's what a lot of teams have done to Luton this season. Maybe it's a momentum killer, and you can go and let's get something. And it was going that way. It was, everything was going in that direction until it wasn't, and the fluke happened.
Yeah, we'll come on to that second half shortly, because that is the bit that encouraged me so much on the evening. It did. Yeah, at 1-0, the reaction was really, really good. We've come away from previous away games when we reviewed away games, and I'm only referencing away games because we've said quite a few times on this podcast it's a home and away thing. I've come away from away games, 1, not thinking we really had a go, and 2, not really seeing a plan of how we were going to have a go. By recent away games, I'm largely talking Blackburn, Bristol City and Swansea. Unless the Swansea goalkeeper gave it to us, there wasn't really I couldn't really see an attacking structure that got us up the pitch and created chances, and lo and behold, there were no chances.
And there was a bit of that in the early stages of this game, that I couldn't see how they were going to try and play through, even though I had more bodies there than we usually used to. And I was thinking, oh, same old, but they figured it out.
And then eventually you could see the wide players flicking it around the corner into Morris. And then as soon as that happened, runners happened, and we almost equalised, didn't we, about 5-10 minutes after they scored, with this exact same thing. Chong flicks it round to Morris. Morris just touches it off. Chong takes it on into the penalty box. He's absolutely driving at them at this point. To be fair to Chong, he looks up, puts a lovely ball through. Amari's running onto it, hits it really, really well. You referenced a minute ago you didn't know how Frey's shot got in and no one was on the line to cover it. QPR gave you an exact example of what to do, because someone went to the line, got it off the line. Unfortunately, poor old Zach couldn't get his feet untangled to put it in, and there was another person on the line when it hit Zach and got. And then the other thing that Luton defenders don't do is pile in on a ball and throw themselves in front of it, and 2 QPR players did as Leo Walsh was lining up his shot. But there was encouragement from that move, and from that moment onwards, either side of half-time for about 20-25 minutes, we saw a Luton Town that we haven't seen for a long, long time, home or away.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, I think people sometimes get a bit annoyed that you try and pick out the positives. There haven't been for a couple of the games, so I don't know how you think we've picked out positives from some of those. But when you've got that little passage of the game where you did really it started to click, and you're thinking, blimey, where's this come from? But then you think back to all those other podcasts we've done, and you're thinking the bar is set so low at the moment that if you think you're going to go from 0 to 60 in 5 seconds, it's probably not going to happen. But you can have these spells, and maybe like in all football games, when you're having a good spell, you should probably capitalise on it. But
And that's the negative, isn't it? Just lacked a clinical, ruthless edge. You could argue that the Amari'i Bell shot fell to the wrong person because it was on his right foot as well, wasn't it? If that fell to maybe Zach, who would have been on that side as well, if that fell to him, you'd have fancied there was more of a chance of the net bulging. I mean, hell, even Marvellous Nakamura had a shot in this period. It landed somewhere in Shepherd's Bush, but he had a shot in this period. A man's not here to shoot, don't forget. But aside from the clinical edge that it lacked, it was enjoyable. I was sat there enjoying watching the town for once, and you've got to go back to Norwich for the last time that truly happened, save for them 5 minutes at end of the Stoke and the Derby games, which were just 5 special minutes. There was a passage of play where you could see what Luton were trying to do, and they were doing it, and it was really good to see. And you could also see the QPR players. They're like, what's happened here?
yeah, they just seem structure. It's been structureless so often that you're sort of banging your head against the wall, and then it's suddenly clicking, and you're wondering, well, clearly that's in part because of the formation. You've got extra bodies in more advanced positions. You've got Zach Nelson having a fantastic game, probably his best game in a hat shirt. Chong doing what we thought Chong was going to be doing all season. And Fana, who we didn't know much about, and we were led to believe is a defensive midfielder, and doing a really decent job at sort of linking the play. In the second half, in fact, he had some very good link up with Morris. You're right, he wasn't playing a striker. I did read a couple of people saying that, but he was definitely a 10. And that's fine if you think what's he playing him as a 10. But the evidence was that he could do it, and that's from not having played a game for 6 weeks or more, and never having played in English football as well. I think you've referenced plenty of times that it's going to take you probably a year for most foreign players to come in and get to grips with English football. I think that might have even been the case with Thierry Henry when he first came over. Arsenal fans don't get at me if it wasn't, but that was a long time ago.
There's lots of examples of people struggling when they first come over. I mean, okay, we're led to believe that he can hold the language up, you know, not necessarily fluent or anything like that. Why would he be? But that's the first port of call, isn't it? You've got to learn a new language. You've got to learn a new set of teammates. You've got to learn a division that's as intense more intense than any other division in world football. And you've got to do it all as a 20-year-old with presumably no one really around you to help. I would imagine his support network is still either in Sweden or making their way to Luton, in much the same way that it took Tom Krause's support network a few months to come over. And going back even further, Simon Sluga, who had a real tough time settling in whilst his support network, his girlfriend and things, was still back home. So yeah.
But the early signs
I thought
were really positive from him and how he played. If he's come over here and he's shown an ability to play in that more advanced role, then why not? If he can play further back, fine. I was led to believe he was an 8, but then there was lots of people I saw on social media, lots of people from Sweden saying, no, he's definitely a central midfielder. Played there for AOK, but maybe something has happened in the intervening period that said he can do a lot more. And if he's that all action midfielder and he can do all of it, it'd be a hell of a signing, because that was good, very positive stuff. I mean, he had 2 decent chances, should have at least got it on target. He hasn't scored a goal, I don't think, for AOK, is he? So maybe that's where that lacks. But listen, if you're going to sign a number 10 who's everything, then Luton probably aren't signing him as good as their, you know, statistical scouting network or the wider net they're trying to send out probably is. But that's always been the case because of his checkbook isn't his book big. By the way, kids, the checkbook was a thing you used to write in to pay for things. Now, Apple Pay, maybe.
How old are you? Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, look, is he a 10? Isn't he a 10? Time will tell. Is he a 6? Is he an 8? Who knows what he is? But Accrington fans, if I told them Jordan Clark's a central midfielder, they'd say to me, no, he ain't. He's the best right winger in EFL. Well, funnily enough, Players can convert into different positions. It's allowed. It's not a problem. And also, if you're going to put him in the team, and you pretty much had to put him in the team after the 3 defeats over Christmas anyway. It needed some fresh blood. Given that we're not certain that he's up to the intensity of English football, put him in a 10 where if he does struggle, he's got cover behind him and it's not going to be as critical as if he was in the Liam Walsh role where he really would need to be bang on it. Otherwise, we'd get swamped left, right and centre. So I have no problem with it. Whatever I am encouraged with him is when he went into that position for about 10 minutes, he picked the ball up and drove with it. And I was like, aye, we ain't had this in the centre of midfield for a while.
Exactly. Just people taking the football and engaging defenders instead of like getting to a defender and thinking, where am I going to go here? Because there's nobody there making a run or in space or passing backwards, and then people getting frustrated. So yeah, lots of encouraging signs there. And in the preview podcast, we called for him to go in, and if he wasn't up to the energetic levels needed, play him and get him off after 60, 70 minutes, which ultimately is what happened. I think he came off in 74 minutes. But a lot of what he did in the game, particularly if it isn't his natural position, showed he could probably do it, and lots of encouragement. So, like you say, a lot of it, you were like, what it wasn't was sitting there going, oh no, I don't see. This is another half an hour of this. Where's this going to go? There's nothing happening. No goals are coming from this. What you're thinking is they're working their way into this. There's some structure. They're playing through the lines, which is not like, it's not all just being lumped up, because you can't now. You've just got Morris, who's the only man's going to be holding up. So you've got to be cuter about it. And it was enjoyable.
That first 15 minutes of the second half was so good to watch. We were, like you say, we were passing through the lines. Liam Walsh was good in the first half, but maybe a bit quieter in that position than Rob wanted him to be. Obviously, at halftime, they've addressed where everyone is and everything, and Walsh was finding space a lot. And then from Walsh, it was out wide. Then it was into the forward. Some really good interplay with Morris and Fanner. In an ideal world, you'd have probably liked that the other way round, Fanner backheeling it for Carlton Morris rather than the other way round. But we got in on their goal with some lovely, intricate moves. Again, you'd want a finishing edge on that. That will come, I'm sure, if we stick with this formation, regardless of who the manager is. I think that will come. But I was sat there, last 3 away games, partly because it's been cold, but also partly because I've been bored. I've been sat there with my arms folded, and every now and again I'd get my phone out and check Twitter or something to see what's going on, because I knew I weren't going to miss nothing on the pitch, particularly at, say, Blackburn, when they were 2-0 up and had declared at half-time. We could all have gone home at half-time and we wouldn't have missed anything in that second half. Here, I wasn't. I was engaged in the game. I was getting right behind them, and, even when shots were blocked and going out for corners and things, the crowd were right behind them because they saw a team that was on the front foot, that was brave. That's all we want Luton to be. Be brave, be on the front foot, have a right good go at it. Okay, we've ended up losing the game. We've lost the game to a monster freak. But for that 15, 20 minutes...
And against the side that were banging form. If anyone's thinking Luton's terrible away form, it is. It's 10 now. It's still terrible results-wise. And mostly performance-wise apart from that. To go to a Loftus Road where you rarely get anything anyway, even when you're playing good, against a team banging form who have gone from below Luton to looking like they could probably challenge for promotion, wouldn't that be nice? But, it can be done. To expect to go there and batter them, which is why in the preview podcast I predicted a defeat because that's the way it was going. But when you get to 1-1, you're thinking, I'm going to be happy to be wrong here, because Luton were the team on the front foot. They were creating chances in open play as well. How many times have we said that, when usually we're thinking, well, we're just playing for free kicks and corners? And all of that was encouraging. And then...
I mean, if you'd rung me on the hour mark and said, there's a goal about to happen here, I'd have been happy days, because there's only one goal that's going in. And then, a free kick gets given. I didn't exactly see what was going on, but Smith's got a load of blood on him, hasn't he? I have absolutely no idea how that's allowed to
be. I saw it. There was a replay. So it's totally, there's no malice in it whatsoever. he's trying to take on 2 players. One of them is Amari'i, and Amari'i steps in to try and make a challenge. His arm is naturally out. It's not like he's flung an elbow, but his elbow has connected with Smith's eye. When I saw it at the time, the blood was everywhere, and I thought it'd come from his brow, but there's since been a picture on Twitter. He's got a big cut here. So it's an unfortunate one. It can happen in boxing if you get caught with a head or an elbow or something. It just opens up. There wasn't any malice in it, but
I mean, it took ages to be treated, didn't it? That Robbie is right. That should have been treated off the pitch, and they should have been playing however long with 10 men, because it happened on the sideline, and he walked onto the pitch. The referee should have been absolutely adamant that the physio should be coming out and treating that on the sidelines. As it turns out, Smith wasn't involved in the goal anyway, but it did allow them to sort of set up a structure of a training ground set piece. And the pass into Chair, someone's blocking the camber, otherwise he would have got out to it. I didn't see who it was, but it really is like aggressively stopping the camber getting to the ball, and nothing was made of that. The shot's going somewhere near Chelsea, and Fox tries to get out of the way of it, and how's your luck? He can't even get out of the way of it. Hits the bottom of his foot. Kaminsky's already committed himself one side, and the ball goes in the corner of the other side. And there was pictures on Sky, which I saw because I couldn't quite see exactly what went on. So I put Sky Sports straight on the phone, because there's always a delay on the Sky Go or whatever, to see exactly what had happened. And as it just showed the goal, Sky have got a picture of Rob looking up to the sky and like, what is going on here? How's my luck, sort of thing, as I referenced at the start of the podcast. And that's exactly how I was thinking. What have we done to deserve that?
yeah, you and me both. A lot's been made of that look up to the sky, but what are you supposed to do? You've set the team up differently. You've changed. We've called for that.
Everything
beforehand.
we asked for in that preview podcast and
change
podcast
formation.
before it.
Put the new guy in if he's available. We thought Doughty might be available, and he's not, which was disappointing. But that's okay. Give him until Preston, and that's fine. But yeah, everything that we asked for, we got. Maybe apart from like a bit more nous in defence, but we didn't have any nous in defence anywhere and getting beaten. But then there was nothing going forward. There was a period away where the goals were happening, and so you could just look at the defence. But when there's nothing at both ends, you're like, oh God. So to have the change where you can actually try and affect games by scoring goals and pegging the team back in, the opposition team back in their own half, then that was exactly what we wanted, really. You can nitpick a lot about the game. You can you're well within your rights to say, 15, 20 minutes doesn't make a difference when the rest of it's been drossed, but it is going to have to be
Rungs on the ladder,
slowly
isn't it?
catchy monkey in that regard.
Yeah, rungs on the ladder. I mean, we weren't even on the ladder after the last 3 away games. We'd fallen off it completely. I'm not even convinced the ladder was standing up against a wall anymore. It was just...
Well, I think somebody's definitely walked under it a couple of times because the luck ain't there.
Ain't they just? Yeah, killed a couple of black cats and trodden on cracks in the pavement and everything else that's supposedly bad luck. We should, just before we go off, reference our equalising goal, actually, because although it was another set-piece goal, that was a hell of a jump from Mark McGuinness. He must have been half a body above anyone else. Heads it down into the corner where nobody can get to that. Heads it down into the corner. If only we could have done that 45 minutes later. But really, really good header. And another Zach Nelson corner that was really, really good as well.
Yeah, if he's playing, get him on the corners all the time. His delivery had been absolutely fantastic, as well as an open play. He was taking players on. Lovely little move where he skipped past 2 once, got into the box, pulled it back. Really good. But from a dead ball, considering there was that confusion about who was going to be taking corners, then I don't think there's any confusion anymore. Get Zach Nelson on him, and he's whipped it into the danger area. Nobody's marking Mark McGuinness, which is bizarre, but you still got to get it in. It's a fantastic lead, fantastic header. Silenced the crowd. Should have gone on and got something from that. And the fact that we're sitting here saying we haven't is, on the goals front, it's down to really bad luck. Then you can say they had a lot of chances.
People would be screaming at us that they had a lot of chances at this point.
And they did. They had a lot of chances. They had a lot of chances in the first half when the defence was really figuring it out and all 6s and 7s. And then when that goal, the second goal went in, Fox's fluke. It got very ragged, and there was 2 mistakes, really bad mistakes from McGuinness and rumours that probably should have got punished by Alfie Lloyd, but luckily didn't.
But there's a few things on here, isn't there? In that there's a saying, "Goals change games," and that was perfectly referenced there, because without that goal, Frey doesn't go off. For starters, Frey doesn't go off. They showed no inclination of taking him off at any point before the goal, but he went off near enough straight after it. They were obviously planning on playing on the counter-attack, hence why they brought the fast striker on. So he wouldn't have been on the pitch anyway to have caused McGuinness trouble down their left-hand side, or indeed to have fed on the Paul Walters header. So that's one thing. And if you just look at the game state at the time that goal went in, we were as on top of a game of football as we have been for a heck of a long time. And there's nothing to suggest that if Morgan Fox had got out of the way of that ball, that pattern of play wouldn't have continued. Because that shot, I mean, that would have needed a boomerang multiplied by a frisbee to get anywhere near the goal. It was going absolutely nowhere near it. It was at the corner flag before it was at the goal.
They weren't creating their chances. Luton created them for them. Even when you're talking about, they had loads of chances. If you want to say, and it's a valid thing, if you want to say, yes, but QPR could have scored 5 or 6 in that game, yeah, of course they could. 2 of them were massive Luton mistakes, just gifting the ball after that second goal for Fox. The first half was crosses galore, where they weren't getting to grips with it. And you can look at both of those things and say, yeah, Luton need to be better. There's things that need to improve. But like I say, it's not all going to be good straight away.
No.
So there was a lot that wasn't right, but there was some good stuff. So it's right to pick out the stuff that was good, because that wasn't there at all.
Exactly that, yeah. And maybe some of the stuff after the second goal, some of it was done, as I say, by that change. I think it's only right to reference that some of our substitutions didn't have the desired effect. I'm Captain Hindsight talking there. Of course I am. None of the substitutions in essence were...
At least someone is, not me.
Well, were designed to make us worse, but I think they did. I don't really think any of the subs that happened made us better in any way, shape or form. But hey, talk about damned if you do and damned if you don't. We've been critical on recent podcasts of the lateness of the subs, or sometimes not even happening at all. This time they were early. They were responsive straight away. They didn't work. That's the life of a manager. Whether your manager's in good form.
Subs, isn't it? We've become accustomed to this phrase of game changers. Sometimes they don't work. I mean, probably most of the time they don't work, in the same way most games of football aren't that interesting.
But when they do, you remember it.
You pick out the good. You pick out the good things, and I don't think they particularly contributed, and it kind of fell a bit flat towards the end.
Yeah, and our formation disappeared, didn't it? The formation that had got so strong in the early part of that second half, where everyone was working in sync and in unison. When Elijah came on, no one seemed to really know who was where in an attacking area, and the defence just started panicking. And it was almost like, oh, Elijah's on, we can whack the ball long again. But that was so not what we needed at that time, because they'd brought Ronnie Edwards on, and a little bit, and initially they started him off in central midfield, and then when we pushed Fanner back, he went and played centre half. When we pushed Fanner back into the deeper role, I'd have loved to have seen Woodrow come on in that 10 role then, because I think that 10 role is ideal for Cauley Woodrow. He works well with Carlton Morris. We were on the front foot. We'd have had Fanner driving from behind as well. I think that would have worked. I didn't really see the logic with putting 2 strikers there, because Eli started off playing behind Morris, then they switched it round, and then they were alongside each. It just felt like that plan that you could clearly see had got a bit misty.
Yeah, it's very strange, because the last time in the Championship we were singing the pair of them praises. Like, it was rare that a team played 2 up front, and they were ripping it up, and it just sometimes looks this season like they're they're playing a bit like strangers, really. But you had to try and throw it on to try and affect the game. I think you probably also have to give Rangers some credit for their nous of game management. They did that quite annoyingly well, quite frustrating, and that always changes the momentum of games. But they had that. They've always got that. I mean, the preview podcast I referenced, if I'm going to say anything about QPR, it's they've got some snidey defenders, but a lot of them know how to manage a game of football.
Yeah, they do. Thankfully, they don't know how to manage set pieces, though, because we had a couple of golden chances from set pieces to equalise. And yet another Zach Nelson ball in to the back post. We've seen this set piece many a times. How they didn't scout that one, I've no idea. Morris is at the back post. He is absolutely all over Jimmy Dunn. He's getting a piggyback and a right old ride. And in the Premier League, that's an obvious foul, but it's not in the Championship. And once he's allowed to head the ball, he really probably should have found the bottom corner rather than the goalkeeper's feet. You only had to look at Morris's reaction to know that he thinks he should have scored. And had he have done 2-2 with about 15 minutes to go, maybe we've got ourselves back on the front foot, or at the very least, we've got ourselves something to cling back onto. Wasn't to be the case. Of course, they could have gone and scored up the other end 2, 3, 4 times. They hit the post. Seeing the replays of the first one, the one that McGuinness's back pass got nowhere near Kaminsky, that shot's in, isn't it? And then it hits the ground and takes some weird bounce, and it's wide. And as I say, the second one hit the base of the post, and I think there was another chance somewhere in and amongst that lot as well. It's very hard to see at the other end of Loftus Road. I don't know if they put candles in floodlights, but it really isn't.
It's a dark ground.
It is a dark ground, yeah. You never get back in the Premier League with them floodlights, not based on what we had to do at Kenilworth Road to get the floodlights up. And that yellow ball doesn't help either. It's as dark a yellow as you can possibly see. And maybe that's why they didn't defend in injury time very well, because we've got ourselves another corner. And to be fair, this isn't a game that we've let peter out. I think, sometimes away from home, we've just let games peter out. This time we didn't.
I was wondering, who's Peter?
Yeah. No, he's not. We haven't signed him yet. He's one of the disciples we haven't signed yet, but I'm sure he'll come. Liam Walsh is on corners by this point, and you're thinking, and I actually referenced it to someone alongside me, keep it on the pitch this time, because we scored against Hull, didn't we? Walsh to McGuinness, but the corner had gone out. Well, it was the exact same corner, Walsh to McGuinness. He runs onto it. He's still a half a body above anyone else in the penalty box. And as soon as you see that happen, you're getting ready to cheer, because the net has to bulge. But as I referenced in the first one, he headed it down and off of the pitch and into the corner. This time he goes for the top corner and misses it 2-3 inches, but 2-3 inches is all it needed. You only had to look at his reaction to know he has to score. And that was the last chance, and who knows, a managerial fate might be determined by the width of a crossbar, really, because coming away from there with a 2-2, whilst there would have been lots of negatives that would have had to have been repaired, you kind of think that there'll be natural improvement in this formation when they play it 2, 3, 4 times like you've referenced earlier on in the podcasts. But there was a heck of a lot to like. 18 shots, the most of any away game this season, joint with Plymouth. That in itself is a positive. Okay, only 4 on target. That's a negative, but listen, you're not going to go from 0 to 100 straight away. There are going to be things that you have to rectify along the way.
Yeah. We've gone through games where nobody's taken a shot. You're like, well, come on.
Exactly, yeah. I think we had 4 shots.
Don't buy a ticket.
I think we had 4 shots in total at Swansea. That's in total. And one of them was gifted to us when the goalkeeper gave it to Morris. Not the case here. 18 shots. That's a positive. Yes, we've got to work a heck of a lot better defensively. There's things to improve on in that regard. There are people that can improve in that regard. And hey, we might even sign players and things like that. But going forward, that was an awful lot better. It really was. And I was at the point coming away from there, and there were a lot of people talking to me as we were coming out of QPR, because I was at the furthest block from the exit. So lots of people saw me as we were walking out, and we were all like, cool, that was a lot better, wasn't it? Whilst acknowledging that, we still defended badly, but like you referenced, 4, 5, 6, 10, 15, 20, however many defenders we've got, we can't defend. So we kind of accepted that, but we was just so pleased that we saw a team that had an attacking structure and an output to it and something to build on. There's a platform there to build on that. Yes, there's an awful lot of doubt, because the last time we thought we had a bit of change and a bit of hope at Norwich, we went straight back into the back 3 against Swansea and clung on for a 1-1 draw in a game that we never deserved to get a 1-1 draw from. So you come in with a little bit of trepidation as to whether that formation will stay. And I have to say, Rob's comments about Amari'i Bell being available worries me, because when Alfie's back, does that mean we can't play a back 4 again? Time will tell on that. Who knows if Rob will be the man by that point anyway. We'll come on to that in a second. But a couple of other things to reference. He recognised that we're in a relegation battle. You got a bit of stick in the last 2 podcasts on the comments on YouTube for not asking questions. That is wrong. James does ask questions. However, press conferences before the game are now behind a paywall. After the game, the club use their own interview and don't put the post-match press conferences out. But I can absolutely guarantee you this guy alongside me, he does ask the questions fans want asking. Sometimes the answers are just straight batted and there's no newsworthy answer to it. And unless you pay for the pre-match press conferences, you're not going to hear it anyway. So the newsworthy answers are all available online and they are there if you want them. So well done on asking that question about relegation, because we are still knee deep in relegation trouble, but at least for the first time, and I referenced it after Swansea after Norwich, that no one seemingly acknowledges that we're even in a relegation battle. At least then it was acknowledged that we're in a relegation battle. Based on add that to what we saw on the pitch in terms of change, and maybe there was a slightly brighter outlook in that at least we're aware of the situation we're in.
Yeah, I think so. And it's not that it's probably too late to ask him. It was asked a couple of months ago, actually, in a pre-match press conference, not by me, but at the time the answer was, well, I'm not even going to talk about that. It's just the next game. So the answer you get, you can't do anything about. You can ask the question and the answer you get. But this time, the answer was definitely, you can't ignore the fact that Luton are in a relegation scrap because the table tells us so, and we're halfway through the season, and we're 2 points above the drop zone, and the teams below have started picking up points, and so yeah, we are. That's, everybody knows that. It's almost like, yeah, we're preaching to the converted there, aren't we? You've all been saying that. In our comments, you say it to us sometimes. The conversations I have with people, seeing mates down the pub, it's that, and that's just the reality. So it's I wouldn't say it's a positive step, but it's a bit of recognition that needed to happen.
Yeah, you can't fight a battle that you don't think you're in, ultimately, and so it's good that they've recognised that we are in it. Still think we've got enough to get out of it, and I'm even more encouraged we've got enough to get out of it regardless of what the next week or so holds. Having seen what I saw on Monday, yes, they've got to improve a lot defensively, but that's pretty much all they've got to improve on. And, finishing.
Well, crosses, really. You've got to figure out how to...
Yes, just stop the thing.
I think the argument legitimately could be about that. Well, you can't have just decided in that week to try and practice 4 at the back. Surely, why aren't you trying? You've played 3 at the back, 3 centre-halves at the back with a 5 for so long, but isn't there a plan B to practice a back 4 so you know if you ever need it to go in to play it? Because the first time it ever happened was because Kaminski got sent off at Pompey and they did it really well. So if that's an argument that you've got, it's a legitimate one. But the players that they had back then in defence available, maybe not the ones they've got now, and there's some issues there that need to be ironed out. Rue Waters hasn't played by the game before that for months. But yeah, crosses, they didn't defend them well, and that it looked terrible. So there's something to work on, isn't it? So it's not all like we're saying it's all positive.
No, it's not. It's not all positive. Obviously, the result was not positive. It's a 10th away defeat on the trot, and who knows what the sort of repercussions of that is going to be. And yeah, defensively, it was a disaster class either side of that half an hour, either side of half time, where Luton looked like they'd got a foothold in the game. But, just your eyes tell you there was a lot more promise in that formation than there was in the formation that we've spent a year watching and not really knowing who's where and who's meant to be where or anything like that. Yes, they've got to mark up a lot better. Yes, they've got to stop crosses coming in a heck of a lot better than what they did. And yes, they've got to finish their chances an awful lot better than they did. But that's 3 things to work on as opposed to 5, 6, 7 and 8 things to work on that we've had in previous games. So whilst we didn't get what we deserved, there were shoots of life. I mean, I'm not going to sit here on this podcast and call for change on the pitch until I'm blue in the face and then not acknowledge that there was something good that come from it when we've had that change on the pitch. Would I like us to be better? Yes. Would I expect us to be perfect at the first go of it? No. But we do need to get better, and we do need to get better quickly, regardless of what's to come. Usually we kind of give Rob's reflections on the game here, but we're not going to do that for a couple of reasons. Obviously, we're 24 hours later than what we usually would be anyway, so his comments are kind of a bit older than what they normally are, and they've been done online if you've not heard them on any interviews or anything like that. And also the rumour mill has opened, Jimbo. There's a strong rumour doing the rounds on Wednesday as we speak, from national sources this time. Last time the rumour was doing the rounds, it was kind of unverified sources. This time national sources are reporting that Rob Edwards is going to leave the club by mutual consent, which he acknowledged in his interview was a fate that could come his way purely on results. He understands it's a results game. It would be ironic if we sack a manager who seemingly had a refusal or stubbornness to change, to then sack him the game after he's finally changed things on the pitch. But ultimately, it is a results business, and that is 10 away defeats on the trot. It's 4 defeats of all kinds on the trot as well. We're 2 points above the relegation zone. There's now the acknowledgement that we're in a relegation battle. So from that point of view, there could well be something in it this time.
There could be. I mean, I've asked the question of the club, and I didn't get an answer today, so I wanted to be able to come and say for sure. It's all about corroborating it. Social media can get away with itself sometimes, as the previous rumour came about, and I wouldn't necessarily buy in too much of the origin of the story when it happened this morning.
We were speaking all day, weren't we? Because we thought, obviously if there was any truth in it, we would be doing a different podcast now. And if the rumour comes to life, we will reflect on it in a different podcast. So we've been talking all day, and the first rumour, we were like, not really sure about those sources. Plus, it came out 15, 20 minutes after a Sky Sports journalist announced that we're very close to having a bid, or we're in strong talks with Middlesbrough for Isaiah Jones, which I'll come on to in a moment. So it started off kind of uncredible, didn't it? But then when you hear it on TalkSport, a radio station that our own chief executive's been on many times, you kind of take a little bit more notice when a national radio station is highlighting it. Do they get everything right? No. I'll give you an example. James and I were down at the training ground last season, ready to do an interview with Jacob Brown for this podcast, and both he and I were talking to Andros Townsend, who hadn't signed at that point. We were politely asked not to make any reference of Andros Townsend signing until it was announced the following day. I got in my car, and TalkSport were telling everyone to the world that Andros Townsend was in talks with Crystal Palace, even though I had literally just spoken to the guy for 10 minutes, 15 minutes prior to that. So they don't get everything right. But if they're prepared to report it, there must be some sort of legitimacy to it, wherever it is that they've got their sources from, and then accompanied by the Daily Mail, who, when you look into it, are only reporting reports, but ultimately they're still happy to go with it. And these days, sort of mainstream companies really want double verification before they go live with stories, don't they?
I've gone through periods today of thinking, I'm not sure about it, then more periods where I've thought it's true. Obviously, I've tried to corroborate it, and I haven't. So there's been no noise about it at all. So maybe maybe no news is good news. I don't know,
what
really.
Also doesn't help or clear the waters any is the last time the rumour mill was in action, within half an hour there was a tweet of Rob doing training saying he's our manager, blah, blah, blah. Radio silence has gone up again today.
Yeah. So I kind of did a mental pros and cons list on it, really, because the cons for me are that the timing's not great, and everybody, I think, would acknowledge that. We probably should have, if it was going to happen,
Middlesbrough.
Maybe Middlesbrough with time. Now you're in the transfer window, and on the same day we're talking about, and these are good sources, about Isaiah Jones and the formal talks for a possible 5 million, up to 5 million signing. The same day that happens, and then to get rid of a manager, that the time in there doesn't sit well with me. And then like you say, we've just spent half an hour talking about a match where there were positives that if you can build on those, you can see a way out of the current predicament. Also, I spoke to Rob on Monday night after the game and asked him about relegation, but then the question was also put to him again about whether he'd walk, and he said no, he wouldn't. He wants to work, and also the question: has he had any conversations with the board about the situation, about his position? And on Monday night, he said no. So if those conversations you would think are going to happen, they would have happened on Tuesday, and there's enough time on the Tuesday for that to happen, because the story sort of came to light a little bit on Wednesday morning. So there's time that could happen, but the timing doesn't really, I don't know, doesn't really sit well with me. So, the only thing I'd say is, like, until it's confirmed, or people can corroborate it, as I've tried, then it's just it is a rumour at the moment. Strong, yeah, the parts of it are strong,
stronger than it's ever been, isn't it? But ultimately, again, very, very rarely do the club air their dirty linen in public. So
there's also the regular pre-match press conference for the weekend game, not Forest game. That's happening at a regular time as it currently stands. That's not changed. So, yeah, you could look at it whether your glass is half full or glass is half empty. You probably both have an equal shout at it. Yeah, it's a strange one. By the time you listen to this, there may have been some news, and we'll do a pod about it if and when that happens. But we were all kind of expecting towards the end of the day, the old 5 p.m. when signings are usually announced, that there might be a bit of a word on it, and there wasn't. So we're all in the dark a little bit about it.
We are, yep. So that's where we are with regards to Rob. Were he to be in charge on Saturday, and we'll come on to Saturday in a moment, I want to talk about Isaiah Jones first, but were he to be in charge on Saturday, I think there'll be a lot of good feeling still if the formation stays the same and we build on it. And I think we would fall through the floor if we go back to that five at the back, 3 at the back, however you see it. That's for Saturday. As I say,
particularly because it's an away game at currently the second or third best team in the country, which is remarkable considering the turnaround from last season. Nobody's expecting to win that game. We don't need to win that game. It's going to be a massive distraction from the actual situation that we're in, which is trying to get away from the relegation. So you could conceivably go up there and try and fine-tune that formation a bit better. Admittedly, there'll be some changes in personnel, and that's fine, but we don't like to say the word free hit, but that is what that would be.
Yeah, that's an absolute free hit. Crikey, yeah. If we win, ultimately, if we win, the Plymouth game gets cancelled. Do we want to play that Plymouth game before they get a new manager in place and get, feet under the carpet and things? Who knows? I mean, they could still win their cup tie and get it cancelled anyway, couldn't they? So, before we touch on Forest, Isaiah Jones, this has been a rumour for a few days, so we think it's a legitimate rumour. Generally, when rumours are nonsense, they come and they disappear every bit as quickly as what they arrive. But this one's been doing the rounds. It's now being reported by Sky Sports journalists who are affiliated to the Northeast, and they all have their own sort of action zones, don't they? London, Midlands, Northeast, or whatever. So it's a legitimate source. Now, I like this signing, Jimbo. I have to say, I've got to eat some humble pie. I've called him a diver and a cheat a couple of occasions for getting Amari'i sent off in Rob's first game at the Riverside. I don't like diving, hate it. I've called out to Heath Chong for doing it all the time. That won't change. Hopefully he has. Time will tell. But I like the sign-in if we're playing a 4-2-3-1 and he's here to play the right-hand side up in that attacking box. I don't like the signing if we're back in a back 3 and he's a right wing back. I just don't like it. We've been there with Chio. Never really worked. Okay, there were flashes where Chio got to the byline and put some crosses in, but the energy he expanded in doing that ultimately caused injury. You'd only have to assume that. And since Chio, we've gone with Hashioka, we've had Rue Walters, we've had Victor Moses. We've spent an awful lot of money on this right wing back position. To spend another 5 million on it, I'd rather spend it elsewhere. However, if we're going to play him in that, let's call it the Chong position from Monday night for simplicity, then I'm all for this, because he's got all the attributes of being very, very good in that position. He can go outside the defender and put the cross in. He can come inside. He's got pace. He's direct. He's dynamic. He's everything that position wants. But then I go back to, if he's just going to play wing back, where do the opposition want people like that? They want him on the edge of your box rather than the edge of their box. And it just strikes me as not a waste of time, but it's a position we don't need to fill, that right wing back role. We've got enough options there. Let's spend 5 million on an area of need, i.e. centre half.
Yeah, I think I'm in the same position. I like it if it's a change that we've seen on the Monday, and trying to play that. It's a formation I've liked. I mentioned a couple of podcasts back. I can't remember who I saw playing it. It was really an interesting formation that I thought we'd never see, but suddenly we have. And if you've got a 3 behind a striker, he would work really well in that. I don't want to try and crowbar him into a wing back position at all. So it depends how they're going to utilise him as to whether it's a useful signing. Because if it's back to the old ways, then I don't know why they're going for it, because like you say, there are other areas of need. But where it's probably stronger, and this is sort of loosely linked to the previous discussion about the managers, that often national outlets will say, sources say, or something like that. That's legitimate if they've got one, and they don't want to say it. That's fine. You're not always going to hear them, even if you put it in the comments of the Twitter. They won't tell you, because that's how that works. But there's also room for, if that doesn't come off, if it isn't true, or what they've been told was true but then doesn't work. There's lots of variations. It's no real skin off their nose, because they're reporting on a national patch. But if you're local, then you've got to try and firm it up a bit more. And what I like is that the Teesside newspaper and the Northern Echo have both firmed it up. And in fact, the stories moved on throughout the day, whereas Sky were originally reporting that Luton were up against West Bromwich Albion for his signature, and now the Northern Echo are saying, no, it's only Luton at the moment have actually opened formal talks. So that one is a lot more in the forefront, I think. Whether the both of them happen at the same time is the one that I want to find the answer out to, and I hope I can.
Yeah, it would be baffling, wouldn't it? You sign £5 million player, deal of £5 million, it's not 5 million up front. He's going to have to tick an awful lot of boxes, I would imagine, based on the way we structure deals, for it to get anywhere near 5 million.
It's apparently 3 million initial, which is okay.
But that's a lot.
He's 26 years old. He played Championship. He was first on the team sheet until Middlesbrough got Ben Dokin and he started ripping it up. It's perfect age. He's somebody that if it is deployed in the formation that we'd like to see, would be a useful one that can come in and hit the ground running. He's not going to have to be loaned out or developed or anything. He's a guy that will come in and do the job there. And his pace, and pace is something we don't have.
Exactly that, yeah. I mean, you look at the goals that we conceded, or the goal that we conceded on Monday night, it came about from Paul Smith's pace, didn't it? And that's a guy who was playing for Leyton Orient a couple of seasons ago, so it just kind of shows you that pace is everything. Yeah, for Luton to spend even 3 million up front and then sack the manager on the same day, it's bizarre. It might be an indication of just who does the recruiting at the football club, and Rob's just given the players and told to coach them. But it still doesn't feel right to me that both stories can happen. Look, I might be wrong. We might get to Thursday.
They definitely both can happen, and so if they do, we'll report on what actually happens. At the minute, there's a lot of speculation, and obviously most of the speculation from a Luton fan point, is understandably, because there's been a lot of people saying that his time's up and he needs to go, and they're saying those things. Yeah, that's fine if that's your opinion, but at the minute it's not the fact, is it? What is rumour and what is more firm and corroborated fact?
Indeed, yep. One thing that is a fact is Luton Town will be back in action on Saturday afternoon when we make the trip to the City Ground, take on Notts Forest. Christmas songs in January is going to be interesting, isn't it? I look forward to hearing them. This is going to be...
You're not opening up all these old battles with them, are you?
This is going to be reserves against reserves, isn't it?
Yeah.
If I don't want to put anyone off of going to a game of football, it's still be a good day out. Nottingham's a fine city, one of the best in the country for a day out, night out, and
Yes, it really is.
wouldn't put anyone off of doing that. But if you're going there thinking you're seeing first team versus first team, they played Liverpool, and right now they beat Liverpool. They can call themselves in a Premier League title challenge. They are not playing anyone of any note on Saturday afternoon. They're not. They're just not. It's not how football works these days. They might have the odd person who's coming back from injury or something that is
They've signed enough players that they've got a very good second string.
Yeah, exactly. But if you're going there thinking you're going to see Chris Wood, Morgan Gibbs-White, Murillo, Elanga, you're not. You're just not. And that's good, because if we did see them, we'd be in right strife. They're still bringing in international footballers, and that whole squad's going to be confident. And our squad isn't confident, and it's as simple as that. So I don't think we're going to get much. We generally change our team for cup ties, so I don't think it's going to be our first team. But we'll make a few changes. One thing I'd like to see is if it's Rob and if it's the same formation, I'd like to see Lamine in the deep role just to see what he's got in that. And as I referenced earlier in the podcast, I'd be quite happy to see Corley Woodrow in the 10 role, because I think he's been, ever since he come back under Nathan, I think he's been crying out to be a number 10. And we've never played a formation that's had a number 10 in it from the start, hence why his impact has been as minimal as it's been. So I would definitely like to see that as an option. I think I'd like to see Hashi go back in there at right back. That's nothing against Rue Walters, but he's been out for a long time. That was a tough night at the office for him, to be fair, on Monday night. Just take him out of the firing line a little bit. If we can get Hashi fired up as well, that would be helpful. And maybe it's the time to have a look at someone else in the centre-back pairing. Holmes played throughout Christmas, as did McGuinness. That's a lot of football. That's 5 games in just over 2 weeks. I think it's 2 weeks and 3 days. So what's that, 17 days? That's a lot of football, to be fair to them. Maybe it's time to have a look at Mads alongside one of them, or, go Amari'i and Mads and put Joe Johnson in at left back or something like that. We played Joe at Everton last season in the Cup, so should be no fears of playing him against Forest. And, and if he's not bang on it, then it shouldn't matter too much. Don't want to see Marv. I thought he was really good in that formation the other night, actually.
Yeah.
But I don't want to see him.
Huge amount of interceptions, actually, statistically.
Yeah, he read the game so well. And the more he started to make those interceptions, the more we crept up the pitch, and the more we won the ball back higher up, in much the way that Rob wanted to do it when he first came in. And when I did an interview with him on this podcast, that was pretty much how he was describing Rob Edwards' ball to us. And that was good. But I don't want to see him on Saturday. I want to see him next Saturday against Preston, and I don't want to do anything that risks that, because Preston is massive game of football for Luton. Any other changes you'd like to see?
Pelly come in, I suppose, wouldn't he?
Pelly?
Yeah.
Pelly and Fanny and them two there. Again, nothing on Liam Walsh. There was a lot of criticism of Liam Walsh coming straight back into the side on Monday before the game. He actually played it really, really well.
He did, statistically as well. He had the most amount of passes or touches outside of Luton's defenders, which is one of the most infuriating things about modern day football. Like, defenders shouldn't, if they can't play, they shouldn't have that much of the ball. But out of Luton's other players of a midfield or attacking nature, he had the most amount of touches, the most amount of passes into the final third. And
didn't foul until the 83rd minute.
He did, and it
might be the
longest, very mild foul.
Might be the longest he's ever been on the pitch and not committed a foul.
No, I thought he was really useful there.
I think it was more the example it sets when people were criticising it before the game. I didn't hear too many people criticising him after the game because, like you say, he had a good performance. It doesn't set a great example that you can plough into a tackle and then walk straight back into the side, albeit 4 games in 12 days, midfielders were tired.
Yeah, from an example point of view, I take it, but there's not many players that Luton actually have that can stick their foot on the pool and influence Luton's attacking play. We've already spoken, even this podcast, that the chances are dried up, but not even just the chances. The ability to just play through the lines had seemed to just disappear, and what he offers you there is that ability, and you saw it at QPR. Like, if you reference the amount of interceptions that Marv got, which puts you on the front foot, give it to. And this is what Marv does the best. Is like get the ball and give it to people that can play, and give it to Walsh, and he did. And I think I'm a big believer in a redemption anyway, because if you always hold people in the same esteem as mistakes or past things that they do, then there's never any room for growth. So he's essentially served his time now, hasn't he? It wasn't great. His apology was heartfelt enough, and I'm led to believe that was his apology. So, give him a chance to make it up to you, and that was a good first step.
Yeah, it was. Interesting if he gets another game on Saturday. He wouldn't do if it's a Fanny and Pelly 2 behind. What double pivot? That's the phrase I was looking for, that we've heard so much in Rob's tenure. But he equally, he could start and one of those two replace him along the way. Carlton's probably due a rest.
Yeah, I think so. That would make sense to me. Is run himself into the ground. Although he had a good game,
Really good,
a really good hold up play, and sometimes partnerships just work, don't they? And I'm not saying it's going to be a partnership with Fanny that happens all the time, but for the time it did do, there was almost an instinctive understanding of where each other were going to be, as referenced by that one of the best moves of that game, where Carlton backheel flicked it into Fanny's path, and he had a shot that was quite wayward, but
unfortunately there was no one trying to jump out of the way of it to hit.
But I think probably he does deserve a rest, and then it's who goes in. Well, you imagine it would be Elijah, because
good memories there.
And Taylor wasn't on the bench at Loftus Road, and I think we all know why, because he's probably going to be on his way sooner or later.
Cannon has resurfaced himself as a potential option as well, hasn't he? I've seen Leicester are on about recalling him, and I've seen us mentioned in dispatches. That might just be because Rob admitted that they did look at him in the summer and no one else has done, and so it's an easy assumption to make, but at the same time there might be something in it as well.
Yeah, potentially they really did want him, and they were trying to get him, and it didn't happen, and that's why Taylor stayed as well, because he was on his way to Huddersfield. So it wouldn't surprise me if they go in again. The first time they sort of waited, would it, and get who they want, and maybe just maybe he's gone to Stoke and gone, don't know about this. Many people have.
Well, he's only been there 3 months and he's already on his third manager with Mark Robbins, so quite possibly. That one will be interesting. We'll follow that one as well. We're not doing score predictions or anything for the Cup game. We didn't do it for the QPR Cup game. We will do a full review because there's likelihood that there's going to be a lot of change, either ahead or during that Notts Forest game, in terms of personnel and formation at the very least, if not management. So we'll do a full review at the usual time, and then we'll look ahead to Preston in a new podcast again at the normal time. We're very much back to normal after this one, but we won't bother with score predictions. We'll give that off. We'll just keep those to the league games. But did you see Luton getting anything? The first thing to reference, this is done on the day now. There's no FA Cup replays anymore. We all know that the big teams fancy a few days off before they jet off on their pre-season friendlies to Mongolia and Singapore and here, there and everywhere. No more replays in the FA Cup. Done and dusted on the day. There is extra time in this competition, though. That's the difference. Obviously, when we drew with QPR, it went straight to penalties. This time we'll freeze our asses off for another half an hour if it's a level after 90 minutes. Do you see it being that? Do you see Luton getting anything? Or is this just going to be, although it's very much a reserve Forest side that we expect to play, their confidence will carry them through?
Yeah, just that I don't see it, because the the difference and the trajectory of the two clubs since we last played and were in a relegation dogfight is stark. We all know. You don't need me to tell you what it is. They're now the second or third current best team in the country, and Luton have lost the most amount of games in the Championship, flirting with relegation, and it's not gone very well. That's the facts of it. And I'm sure there'll be Forest fans watching this gloating of that battle last year, or saying that, yeah, if we didn't have the points deductions, would have been even better. And that's true as well. But you did, and for a while it was close, and in the end it ultimately wasn't. Those are the facts. You don't need to put it in the comments in the same way. You don't need to put in the comments that this man here has been calling you not Suarez, just so I don't have to see this relentlessly in the comments from you Forest fans. He is saying that on purpose because he knows it annoys you. Don't put it in the comments because I don't care.
Nor do we care that Mull of Kintyre is a Christmas song when it blatantly is, because that's another one that we got lots of last season. I've got to be honest, I don't see us getting anything from this game. I'd love to. I wouldn't mind, listen, at some point this season, I think that the season's going to peter out into a couple of months of not really having much to play for. So a cup run from that point of view would extend the season a little bit more. But
that sounds kind of dreamy at the moment.
It does, exactly. We are in a completely different world to that right now. So if we bow out of the FA Cup in the third round for one season and one season only, I can live with that. I suppose ultimately the last thing we need is to run into Erling Haaland in the fifth round again anyway, because it didn't end well last year. It sure as buggery ain't going to end well with this defence, is it? That's for sure. So, yeah, firmly expect Forest to go through. I'm okay with that, particularly if Plymouth lose their tie as well and that game goes ahead either before they get a new manager or before they get time for him to get his feet under the carpet. That's for sure. Yeah, no score predictions for this one, but well done to Claire Clark, who was the only person who went QPR 2, Luton 1. Lots followed your lead, went 2-0 in that game, didn't see Luton scoring, and why would you, based on the 3 games previously to it?
And that's partly why I'm a little bit more buoyed by that performance, because I went 2-0. I was almost conservative because the previous games, it was nothing. And I was thinking, well, that it's just going to be pretty much a cakewalk. And it wasn't really in the end. Ultimately, the result was a defeat, but I think we've explained where the good was and where the bad was. So, but yeah, Claire's going quite good, great guns in the prediction stakes. Fair play,
yeah, absolutely flying. Probably doesn't want to be doing as well as she is, I suspect, because a lot of her results come from away games. But hey, that's what we put it out there for. So, well done to you. And begrudgingly, well done to you on pulling another point away from me. If that ball didn't hit him, I've got 3 points.
Coulda, woulda, shoulda.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, same with if the Swansea winner hadn't gone in, but they do. And that's absolutely fine. I've still got 20 odd games to catch you up. And surely we can get an away win somewhere along the way. Where
It'd be very Luton to go and do it at the City Ground, wouldn't it?
It would. It would, yeah. Well, we are relentlessly better underdogs than we've ever been favourites. We've seen that throughout the course of time.
Well, one thing I actually half gave a thought to this morning, so I'll try and flesh it out now. And I realised this is pie in the sky, absolute fantasy.
I like pie in the
fantasy land. But I would be interested to see whether this team, which were mostly in the Premier League last season, Luton's team, when they go up against the Premier League team, fare better because they were geared towards playing Premier League rather than the harem-scarum relentless nature of the Championship, which we've obviously struggled. We've found it difficult. And that would very greatly interest me. It won't mean nothing because we ain't there anymore and we're not going to get there anytime soon again. But that would be an interesting sidebar.
And if it happens, how many people out there are only going to be where they only performed like that because they were in the shop window? Again, very much damned if you do, damned if you don't at this club at the moment. But is your glass half full? Is it half empty? My glass had smashed after Swansea. It had. They've glued the pieces back together though. I'm not saying there's anything in it, but the glass is there again now. Now I want us to build on that. And hey, there's an awful lot of building to be done on that performance on Monday night. But from where we were in the 3 previous away games, there was an awful lot of encouragement that came our way as well. And a couple of fine-tuning personnel. Maybe Fana dropping back. I'd like maybe Zach Nelson to play that 10 role because he's certainly got the feet to play it. And if that's why they're bringing Jones in to put Chong on the left-hand side, to go Chong, Nelson, Jones behind Morris or Adebayo, whoever the striker ends up being over the course of time, then I'm fine with that as well. One thing we definitely saw, which we saw against Norwich, Zach Nelson cannot be dropped from this team right now.
No, absolutely not. No, fantastic performance. I mean, he statistically was the best player on the park for Luton. Might even been in a combined thing with Luton and the
Because we've
Rangers
spoken
players.
a few times, haven't we, about lack of confidence. Well, here's a kid who hasn't got it. Even in a team that clearly lacks confidence, this kid's shown he's confident. He's comfortable on the ball. He's prepared to carry it. I always like a player who goes to a defender with the ball and commits him, because from there good things can happen. Like you referenced earlier in the podcast, an awful lot of players get to a certain point on the pitch, see nothing doing, and have to get rid of it going backwards. And you've got to start again.
It's a modern football disease. I was watching I think it was a piece on Sky or something. It was probably on Twitter. It don't really matter. They were talking about how wingers don't engage anymore, and they've referenced Jack Grealish. He's not scored for a calendar year, but he sort of goes up there, keeps the ball, brings it back inside, and plays that tiki-taka stuff that Man City play a lot. So yeah, it's great to see a player just go at them and don't be. Don't throw your arms up in the air if he loses the ball, because he's trying to progress the Luton up the pitch and find angles and find spaces. And yeah, he's really impressive at the moment. It's almost like we saw in that performance the next step of his progression in that one performance. And yeah, I wouldn't like to drop him either.
No, indeed, yeah. I mean, if I've got to pay 38 quid to walk through some turnstiles, the least I want is someone to lose the ball trying to do something than lose the ball trying to pass it backwards and not getting it anywhere near the target in the first place. So much more encouraged by that. He just looks good, and he'll always get our support because he's one of our own, as Luton fans were singing quite often throughout that game. And yeah, his dead ball delivery, I mean, you know, you got Alfie on one side swinging them in and you got him on the other side swinging them in. My word, defences have got themselves a problem, or swinging them out depending on which way they do it. That would be good. That's pretty much it for this episode of the podcast. I reiterate, we are supporting the badge, not necessarily the person who's picking the team, and therefore you are okay to notice some positives, even in a time where everything's doom and gloom and the outlook is still quite bleak, and it is still as bleak as it was going into the game. We didn't win the game. We didn't come away from the bottom 3 or anything like that. The good thing is none of the bottom 3 won. They were all held, and you know, a couple of them were tricky games that they looked like they were going to win at one point and they didn't. So that's fortunate. If Lee's goalkeeper didn't have to keep chucking balls in the back of the net against Hull, that would have helped us. But
Yeah.
hey ho, we can't have everything. But yeah, there were some things to build on, whilst at the same time acknowledging there was lots of improvement needed as well. That is it for this podcast. We will react to any breaking news that happens between now and Saturday. But if not, the next time you hear from us will be to review the Notts Forest Cup tie, which we hope will be, well, something built on what we saw on Monday, really, regardless of what the result is. Just want to see that performance and that formation built on ahead of the Preston game. Thanks to everyone who's watched or listened to this podcast. We really appreciate your support. We are very, very close to 2,000 subscribers now, aren't we? Very, very, very close. It'd be fantastic if we can get them over the course of the next week or so. Not just for us, but for you guys. There's another 3-game week on the 3-week game. Crikey, I couldn't watch a 3-week game, so I'm not watching 90 minutes at the minute, not 3 weeks. 3-game week on the horizon when we go to Oxford in midweek. So you'll find out exactly when all of our content drops. And if something does happen to Rob, you'll get the notification of the immediate reaction to that as well. So subscribing helps us, but it will help you too. Thanks very much to the Barber Club and the Lower Level in Luton for hosting our studio, to Sean Grant and the Wolfgang for our intro music, and to Ed Smith Creative for all the designs that you see on set. From Jimbo and myself, until next time, which I think we do hope will be a review of the Notts Forest game and not a look back at Rob Edwards' tenure. Till then, come on, Town, let's have a good go on Saturday.
For me, it's the people and the spirit of the people as well.
I love this town. I love this town. I love this town. You know what I love about this town is actually you. Everyone in it has got this massive soul.
The Luton people